Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around various aspects of the COVID-19 crisis. We cover the financial crisis, the health crisis, and the racial inequality crisis. We try to look at what's happening around the world. Today, we're going to go to India and China to understand what's happening on the border as well as the digital border. We're going to go to New Delhi to speak to Nikhil Pahwa, who is at NIXXIN, the Delhi-based digital rights activist and founder of MediaNama. Everyone, please take a look and please share right now on your favorite platforms. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Everybody, find and share these links right now. Tag a friend, someone who should know what's going on, tag them. This is about how India is tackling TikTok and 50 other apps. In the midst of a global pandemic, India and China are involved in a deadly border dispute. And at the same time, India has just banned 50 plus Chinese apps, including TikTok. Let's learn from a leading expert on what this means for India, China, and the world. You'll meet Nikhil in just a few minutes. Please stand by and please tag your friends and share with your friends on the various platforms. We want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And please tag your friends and also post your questions. Nikhil will answer. He's somebody I've been turning to for years to understand what's happening in digital, not just in Asia, but all over the world. And he has the ear and the scoop on what is happening around digital and various tech stories. So that's why we're very happy to have him here with us, and he'll join us in just a minute. If you're new to this show, we are here every single day. This is episode 111, 111 days of lockdown in New York and 111 days of the show, including weekends. And every day we try to learn together. And I'm so grateful to all of you who've joined us from around the world to make it possible for us to learn. Here's some background on the show. We're live right now on Scroll.in, which is one of India's best news, culture, and analysis websites. We've had more than 1 million viewers of our various projects and various episodes along the way. In the first 100 shows, we had 201 guests. 124 of them were women. We're very proud of that number. It could be even higher. 30 doctors and nurses, 30 plus authors, journalists, CEOs, founders, teachers, professors, guests from 45 cities in 12 countries. And we want to thank our producers at Rose Horowitz 31 and at Vandana _Menon. Please connect and follow them as well. Our hashtag is #SreeCovid19Call. And we are here and we're going to do this show as long as we're on lockdown in New York. And we want to hear from you. Before we start, we're going straight to our sponsors to thank them. First, we want to thank Rutgers Global Entrepreneurship Experience, a virtual teen camp that starts in a couple of weeks. Please tell anyone you know who has a teenager anywhere in the world. They can learn from experts at Google, Facebook, Angie's List, Cognizant. They can get 20% off with the code SREE by going to globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org, globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org. Take a screenshot or share it some other way. We also want to thank our sponsors at Muckrack Academy for letting us put together Fundamentals of Social Media, a free social media course with a certification that you can get right now. It's about 2 hours of work. You can take it live, or you can take it in 2 hours, or you can take it in 2 months. Your choice, and you get a certificate at the end. More than 4,000 people have signed up for the course. Here's your chance, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And here's a certificate of Lauren Mack, who is proudly displaying that. And we're grateful to her and everyone else who's taken the course. So if you have friends or family who would learn and benefit from learning more social media, please tell them to take a look. We're also brought to you by She's on Call, a show that we executive produce with Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. They are surgeons in New York, and every Sunday they have special guests who join them This past week, it was Dr. Jordana Cohen and Dr. Olga Garcia. Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. Just go to She's on Call on Facebook and She's on Call on Twitter, and you'll be able to see last week's episode. This coming week, they have a greatest hits episode. And then on Sunday, the 12th of July, they have Dr. Quinn Capers and Dr. Susmita Patti will be joining us. So please check out She's on Call by following it on all the social platforms. And with that, we are ready for our very special guest joining us at a very special time because it's super early in India. It's super late in New York. It's 10 p.m. here. It's 7:30 in the morning. And we're now going to bring onto the stage here Nikhil, Pahwa, who's going to help us understand what's happening with this tech titans fighting in India and the battle between India and China. So please welcome everyone, Nikhil, Pahwa. Hi, Nikhil.
Hi, Sree. Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm so honored that you would spend some time with us. I presume you've been doing one interview after another and trying to understand what's going on. Either you're being interviewed or you're interviewing people.
No, Sree, we had a fantastic conversation, in fact, yesterday with about 25 tech policy experts across India. And we talked about security, we talked about tech. So it's been engrossing trying to unpack what's been happening between India and China, at least in the cyber domain. And I don't think this is the end of it. We're going to see a lot more going forward.
And certainly something that we all are trying to understand as we look at what's happening. So maybe we should start with just a simple premise of what happened. But before we do that, Nikhil, we ask all our guests one question. How are you doing? How's your family? And with everything that's happening in India, how is India doing with the lockdown? You were in lockdown for a long time, but the numbers seem to be going up.
Yeah, Sree. Excuse me. Sorry, I seem to have a bit of a sore throat. So India's been we were in lockdown, then we went out of lockdown, and ever since India's gone out of lockdown, the numbers have started increasing rapidly. Even during the lockdown, when I stepped out to buy groceries, I could see that there were people out on the street without masks, even though those were required and mandated. So the numbers are increasing, and I think they look like they're going to get worse. There was a time when adding 1,000 new cases a day was seemed to be new. Now it's gone over 5,000 a day. So cause for concern. We have been in lockdown at home since March 14th, and I don't think we'll be getting out anytime soon. We're ordering stuff online. The family is safe and well. I've got aged parents, so we're making sure that we don't step out and they don't step out.
And sometimes it's as hard to keep the parents in as it is to keep the kids in. I'm glad to hear that you're able to do that. I just want to show everyone this headline in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, that right above the fold, you can see right here, India bans Chinese mobile apps after clash. So you're going to explain to us what that is, and I'm going to show everybody the list of apps that was banned by the Indian government. So if you can explain, take your time and explain with a little bit of detail what exactly all this is about.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Actually, a couple of days ago, I think at about 8:45 at night, the Indian government issued a press release saying that under Section 69 of the Information Technology Act, Section 69A specifically, they're banning these 59 apps. Now, the press release itself doesn't talk about China. It doesn't mention China, but all of these apps are essentially Chinese apps. And so this is clearly a move targeting China, and this is not the first time India has done something like this. A month or so ago, India made some changes to ensure that all investments from China were going to be routed through a government approval process if they were looking to invest in India. Even in that press release, India didn't specifically mention China, but they said that countries that have neighboring land borders with India, for them it will have to go through a government process. Now, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka aren't really investing in India, it is mostly China. So they're leaving the door open, but it's very clear that there's been action from India that shows concern about China and is targeting China. Some of these apps are extremely popular. TikTok, for example, is amongst the most popular app in the country, especially below a particular demographic level. So I've seen videos of bricklayers, showing their skills, like literally throwing a brick behind them and landing on a wall. Daily wage laborers, people who are running food stalls, villagers who are sowing crops. There are gardening videos, there are cooking videos. TikTok is a hub of creative activity from places that we didn't expect, that we don't see on YouTube, for example. So it's been a rage. If before the lockdown, if you were to walk around in some parts of Bangalore, Mumbai, or in Delhi, in Delhi, I've seen in Connaught Place in the middle circle. When you're walking around, you can see at least 4 or 5 people shooting TikTok videos. So it's taken an entire generation by storm. And TikTok being banned is going to hurt a lot of creators who are making a lot of money on the platform. But also there, you see UC browser, which used to be probably the largest browser in India as of 4 years ago. Google Chrome has come back and picked up steam and has unseated UC browser, but it's still number 2 because it sort of processes data in the back and sort of gives you a very low cost internet access, which is needed then. And so a lot of people who don't pay much for data plans end up using it because it costs them less. You've got Share, which people use to transfer phones from one to the other and transfer their devices when they buy new devices. And you've also got Cam Scanner, which is very popular for people who store documents. So these are some extremely popular apps which have been banned, and there's a rush to find alternatives right now to them. What's really intriguing is that this ban was actually announced. Section 69 of the IT Act is one. The rules under which mean that the government can keep it confidential. So the very fact that they chose to issue a press statement indicates that they wanted the world to know that they're banning these apps. I've never seen, in 8 years, I've never seen a Section 69 order being published online, leave alone statements being issued. So the order is not being published here, but there's a detailed press release saying that these are apps which are problematic from a privacy and security. As you're showing on the screen, subsequently, TikTok has also received an order, but before it could be banned by ISPs, TikTok itself has said that they are complying, and they have pulled themselves off the Google Play Store, off the Apple App Store, and they have informed users that they're complying with the order. So I think this is really smart from a TikTok perspective, that they're showing that they're in compliance with Indian laws and they're not being adversarial, which is what someone might have expected them to be.
Thank you. That's so much information to unpack there. And we should tell everybody that we asked TikTok to send us a rep or send us a statement. But of course, you have this statement from them already. I presume they're not doing a lot of press at the moment as they decide what to do and how to respond to this. Such a big, big story. In terms of TikTok itself, they had planned to announce, or we're going to invest in a big way in India because it's their biggest market, some 20% of their creators or some users, something like that, right?
Around 30% of the creators are of the users are from India. But India, with a population of 1.2, 1.3 billion is a really large market. We have about 635 million internet connections. It's the largest number of internet users in the world outside of China, which is why it's an interesting market for all Chinese companies. And we've seen we've seen billions of dollars of investment, $8 to $9 billion of investment in the recent past in the last few years from China into India. But it's also the largest market in the world for Facebook, for WhatsApp, I believe for YouTube as well. India is huge because of the population and the usage. And what's happened is that we have the lowest cost internet access in the world. Like for example, for as little as $5, you could get as much as a GB per day, right? And at 4G speeds. So it's mostly a mobile internet market, and it's a high speed access market. An average internet user in India consumes about, before the lockdown, was consuming about 11 GB per connection. And so with the lockdown, I'm sure it must have gone up. You've seen taxi drivers, you've seen shopkeepers watch movies on live stream movies on their phones, just because it's so cheap and easy. So everyone's looking at India from a consumer centric perspective, but it's not a very high revenue market as of now. So it's a tricky space to navigate as well, because from a policy perspective, and we mostly cover tech policy in India and its neighbors, sometimes US centric stuff as well that might be relevant for India. So the policy space has been changing rapidly over the last year and a half, and this is possibly the most aggressive action we've seen from the Indian government in the tech space.
And that, of course, means that there will be some kind of repercussions and all of that as people try to understand what's going on here. We just want to explain to everyone who's just joined us, if you're new, and I hope, Nikhil, you had a chance to share this on your Twitter, on both your account and MediaNama. We should tell folks that MediaNama is a very popular website to understand the digital tech and media aspects of so many stories. Tell us a little bit more about MediaNama, please.
So I started MediaNama in 2008. I used to work with a guy called Rafat Ali, who you know very, very well. He was the founder of Paid Content and now the founder of Skift. And about a year and a half into it, I left Rafat's business and started up. MediaNama started with covering the transformation of Indian media into digital, but increasingly we got interested in stuff like e-commerce and telecom and payments, and we started covering the entire tech business ecosystem as a whole, both content and commerce, but also the enabler, which is the telecom space. And subsequently, because we felt that it was policy that was shaping the digital ecosystem, we started focusing more and more on policy. So I've fought a lot of fights for free speech, for an open internet. I started the campaign for net neutrality in India, which led to Facebook's first and probably only global public policy loss when they were trying to roll out free basics. I took a sabbatical from MediaNama when I did that. And we've been focusing more on tech policy ever since I got back to work after the sabbatical. And effectively, this is the go-to space for everything you need to know about what's happening in terms of censorship, in terms of internet shutdowns. India's getting a privacy law. We try and stay on top of all of this.
And it's a very useful read, so people do check it out. What happens in India in tech is so fascinating because of that gigantic market. We should also just very quickly, if you can tell us about the big investment Facebook made in India and with the Indian company Reliance. If you can explain that, we have a lot of people who may not be familiar with that.
So Reliance Jio is a mobile operator that transformed India. In 2016, they came out giving free internet access to anyone who wanted to use it, who could buy a SIM card, and they ran that for as long as 6 months. So they dropped internet access prices down drastically. Their competitors have struggled to keep pace with them. And Jio is trying to play the vertical game, the vertical integration game. So they have the mobile operator, and now they're trying to play in content and commerce. So earlier this year, Facebook bought 9.9% in Reliance Jio. I've forgotten the exact amount. I think it was about $45 billion or something. Or was it? So they bought 9.9%, and Reliance Jio's raised more and more money ever since then to become probably amongst the highest valued mobile operators in the world. Facebook's intent there is to basically build commerce on WhatsApp, which is their messaging platform, and it's hugely popular in India with over 400 million monthly active users. Unlike how they use Facebook. So with this investment, with Jio, they plan to roll out something called Jio Mart, which is going to be a commerce platform which allows people to transact in an omni-channel commerce manner. So if you want to buy something from your local grocery store, you can buy it over Jio with digital payments from WhatsApp and Jio providing the merchants. So that's basically Facebook's transition into a commerce platform for WhatsApp that's beginning with India.
And I'm always amused how people in America, unless you have an international connection or you worked overseas or you have friends overseas, Americans are not big WhatsApp users, but in places like India and many other parts of the world, WhatsApp is such an important part of the way work gets done and friendships are maintained. Before we continue, we're going to do with Nikhil what we call our global tour. People are going to have checked in and told us where they're watching from, and you're going to tell us if you've been to some of these places and any memories you have of any of them, or if they're on your list. The other day, somebody said, "Oh, it's on my bucket list," and then he said, "No, I don't want to say bucket list because that means there's an ending, so I'll just put it on my list." And you mentioned Rafat Ali, who's the founder of Skift, which is a very important travel publication, business of travel publication, and he was guest number 7 on this show, and you're now guest, in episode number 111. So it tells you how long we've been all at it, you in India and us over here in the US, and no one seems to have learned anything. Jonathan's watching from New York at Union Square, and you've been to New York, so
I've been to New York. I've been to Union Square.
Yeah,
I really miss New York, to be honest.
So we hope
I love that city.
Yeah, we hope you'll come visit. Anand's watching from Andhra Pradesh. He says TikTok will go to the bottom now because of this. Do you think this is permanently damaging TikTok, or this is diplomatic or political stuff that's happening?
So if the impasse between India and China ends, let's say in about 10-15 days, and TikTok goes back on, I think all creators will flock back to it. If it stays till, let's say, the end of the year, creators will have to find other avenues for their content and their communities. So I think TikTok could be hurt very badly depending on how long this stays out.
Haida says hello from the other side. Which side I'm not sure, but hello. Carol says hello. Got curry in a hurry in Richmond Hill, and Trinidad roti for the best tasting food on planet Earth. I'm sure you've been to Queens when you came to visit here. Joe is watching from right outside Atlanta. Have you been?
I haven't been to Atlanta, no.
Yeah. And Radian is watching from Long Island and says just south of Stony Brook where I teach. And Jonathan's tagging people. Everyone, please do this. Tag a friend who can watch this later. Paula Kiger, who's on our team, is watching from Tallahassee, Florida. And she is one of the people on our team that does our New York Times read-along. And we read the New York Times out loud every Sunday, like Slightly Crazy People, on Facebook and other tools. And this past week, our guest was Pavan Dhingra, who is a professor and the author of Hyper Education: Why Good Schools, Good Grades, and Good Behavior is Not Enough. And the other guest was Marina Kurian, MD, surgeon, who's a host of She's on Call. So we do this every single Sunday. We've been doing it for 5 years, and people get a chance to read the news and talk about the news. And this coming Sunday, we're very excited. We have Trish Hall, the former editor of the New York Times op-ed page, and she's going to be with us, and she's the author of Writing to Persuade, a kind of inside look at the New York Times opinion page. All of this is live on on all my platforms at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. That's about 6 p.m. in India, and also available on our archives. All 100+ shows. If you just go to the YouTube archives, you can find all of it there. So please go take a look, everyone, as you are trying to understand this crisis. Minky Warden's here. Minky, hi. She says, so glad you're tackling these thorny topics. Thought you'd want to see this Human Rights Watch research on TikTok's China ownership. So she's linked to it, and she's with Human Rights Watch, obviously worldwide very important organization that's been focusing more and more on the digital battles that go on and not just the things in real life, because it's all connected, isn't it? Isn't it, Nikhil?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things and why it's very difficult to, push back against this ban in a sense is the fact that under law, the Chinese government can take control or they can direct their companies, Chinese companies, to act in a manner that they want, that the government wants them to. So effectively, Chinese businesses can be an extension of the state. And so one of the worries that India has, and I heard this a couple of years ago on the policy grapevine as well, was that during the standoff between India and China in another area called Doklam, there was a concern that UC News, which was very popular at that time, which is the news arm of UC Browser, which is owned by Alibaba, it was downplaying the Indian view on that standoff and highlighting the Chinese view on that standoff. So, that kind of misinformation or that kind of prioritization for the Chinese point of view is particularly possible on content platforms because all algorithms are a black box. And so the one thing that the Indian government might be concerned about is that in the middle of the standoff, these platforms could be used to influence public opinion because these platforms could be an extension of the state in China. So democracies don't do that. They don't necessarily directly control how their companies function. And as long as China exercises that kind of control under law, it's going to be difficult to protest, blocking of platforms, especially in a war-like situation like this.
And this is the statement that you shared with us from the Chinese government, the embassy in Delhi, and basically it addresses this head on. Even though you said China was not mentioned in the in the ban itself, and it says this is a statement on India's blocking certain Chinese mobile apps by the spokesperson of the Chinese embassy in India, and by Mr. Ji Rong. And the Chinese side is seriously concerned with and firmly opposed to such action. India's measure selectively and discriminatorily aims at certain Chinese apps on ambiguous and far-fetched grounds, runs against the fair and transparent procedure requirements, abuses national security exceptions, and suspects the violating of the WTO rules. So this is just the start of what we can expect to see, I'm sure, in the days and weeks ahead. So it'll be very interesting to see how all this turns out. I had my dad, who is a retired diplomat and very active writer and analyst. He says that the apps selected are all lifestyle apps which do damage to China but hurt us least, meaning Indians. Also remember that India has an alternative to TikTok called Chingari. 1 million subscribers in one day, and TikTok fell from number 1 to 200 in one day. And that's a non-technical person's analysis of it. But you can see that he's looking at it from that geopolitical point of view. What is your sense of those comments and others like them? We've seen, as part of the border skirmish that happened, because there's no clear border in that one area, that Indians were throwing onto the ground and basically setting fire to their Chinese-made TVs, their Chinese-made this and that. Yeah. But where will they go? Anything they buy to replace those things will also be made in China.
Yeah, so look, Sonam Wangchuk, who started this movement against Chinese products and Chinese apps, went on to say that apps in a week and hardware in a year. So he doesn't want people to destroy their property. He doesn't want them to throw away their handsets and their TV sets, but saying find a viable alternative within a year for your devices and change apps. Now, the ban on apps has come in, at an interesting time, because there were news stories in India about 4 or 5 days ago saying that there's been an increase in hacks from Chinese companies, or Chinese hackers have been attacking Indian government sites and installations, and essentially that has increased many-fold over the last 4 or 5 days, and this actions happen that now. But even there, a couple of days ago, there was a fake notification, government notification that was doing the rounds on WhatsApp and on Twitter, which mentioned many of these apps as having been banned, and that fake document was full of typos. You could make out it's not a ministry document. The government denied it in a public fact check as well, and lo and behold, a few days later, the government goes and bans most of these apps. So I think this is just another stage of an escalation on the digital side. There has been an escalation on the physical front. Just yesterday, there was news about Chinese troops amassing around another border area on the eastern side of India in Arunachal Pradesh, which China again claims as alongside the Indian part of the side of the line of actual control, which is in this gorgeous area called Ladakh. In fact, even around Ladakh, there is this beautiful lake called sorry, I've forgotten the name, but there's this beautiful lake which has both Indian as well as one part is Indian, one part is Chinese. And they've increased camps and deployments over there. So these are tough situations that are developing on ground. There were skirmishes, and 20 Indian soldiers died in those skirmishes a couple of weeks ago. So sentiments are really, running high in India, and I'm not surprised that we've seen this action. I don't think this will be the end of it, though. We're probably going to see some response from China, then some response from India. But India's been, there's been tech nationalism and techno nationalism in India that's been in vogue for a few years now. It's only been increasing because even at a geopolitical level, India has declined to sign cross-border data flows treaties, which allow Indian users to be served with content and apps and services from various parts of the world. At the G20 summit in Osaka last year, India declined to sign the DFFT agreement. In fact, at the UN, at the open-ended working group, and I was there for that meeting in New York in December. In the subsequent meeting in Feb, India, I believe, has issued a statement which claims where it claims sovereignty over the data of its citizens. So tech is integral, given the fact that you have over 600 million internet connections in India, and all strata of society are now using devices to access the internet. India is very concerned about what happens going forward. The situation between the US and China in case of Huawei is also something that India is watching very closely, and it's going to impact 5G rollouts as well. We're going to see a move away from Chinese hardware, I think, going forward. In fact, Chinese handsets are the most popular handsets in India. Xiaomi, Vivo, Oppo, they're hugely popular in India, and India is a huge market for them.
And these are not brands necessarily that people have heard of in America, but they're very popular in India. When you walk through the airports and stuff, you see them. Here's Malik saying, how crazy a policy is this? It's dumb. And Iman says, I'm craving socializing. I'll try not to write too much here. And Rahadian is linking to your site and to your bio, so people
thank you.
This. And Jigar Mehta, a dear friend who's also doing so much journalism and news. He's with Doha Debates, was with the New York Times. He says, what are some of the big Chinese apps that we might not have heard of in the US? So let's show the list of the ones that were banned, and that will be a good start to try and see some of the apps that people have never heard of outside of India and China, but are very popular. On this, somewhere here is WeChat, right? That's the biggest of the
WeChat. So it's not just WeChat, Sree. It's also, for example, QQ Mail, Sheena Weibo's at number 23. Share It is huge. Like when you change your handsets, and people in India change their handsets sometimes twice a year, to transfer your phone exactly from one to the other, you use Share It. UC browser, like I mentioned, was huge. You've also got you've got Vigo Video, and there's also another app called Vigo Live, which is not on the list. Club Factory, which is clothes, and it's kind of like a group buying app, has been advertising a lot in India. For me, the big one is actually outside of TikTok, Share It, and CamScanner is actually UC Browser. It's a massively popular app, which is a browser that people in India use instead of Safari or Chrome, and it's just because it saves you a lot of data while accessing the internet, and it's really fast. So these apps have been advertising a lot in India. So advertising is also going to get impacted going forward.
Sure. No, thank you very much. For those who just joined us, on the Wall Street Journal today front page, just above the fold, India bans Chinese mobile apps after class. Sorry, I was sneezing behind the newspaper there. So these are sort of things that people are not paying too much attention to here. What is your sense of? I know you're not a geopolitical expert, but you certainly observe what's happening. Why, in the middle of this pandemic, where China already has an outsized role in in everything to do with it, why flex its muscles at this moment?
So one view that I've heard quite frequently in the recent past is that China's activities have increased in the South China Sea, in the border with India, essentially to cater to a domestic audience that is probably also frustrated because of the pandemic and the economic situation post the pandemic. And so what better ways to drive up nationalism than to target an enemy or a potential enemy, or make an enemy out of a country that isn't necessarily one, right? And honestly, we've seen similar. We have a sense that there's similar, and this hasn't come at a bad time for the government, because when you're facing off with an adversary, that's the time when you don't want to be seen as not supporting your country, not supporting your troops, even though the economic situation is dire. So from a geopolitical perspective, you probably see a lot more activity from China going forward. From a tech geopolitics perspective, this becomes really interesting, because I think some of the other countries, especially the US, they're looking at this very closely, because Chinese apps have been spreading and growing rapidly. TikTok is also very popular in the US, right? So I think there's concern about where the data is being stored, whether the Chinese government has access to it. And so in that situation, you might see other countries taking a cue, that they might, for all practical purposes, a League of Democracies formed specifically to look at the tech situation in the world.
And where that goes, we still don't know, because it's so early in this process. Let's look at some of the other comments that are coming in. Olinda says, "Hello, Sree. Hello, Nikhil. Nikhil, my goodness, you're exhausted. Please take care of yourself. Thanks anyway for coming on Sree's show." So obviously people are paying attention to your going on these various shows. And there's my dad, Sree Sreenivasan. Sorry, you were saying?
I'm sorry, just to respond to your dad, not all of these apps are lifestyle apps, to be honest. Okay. Like I said, CamScanner is being used by a lot of entrepreneurs have complained about the fact that CamScanner is no longer going to be available, because they use it to scan their documents and store their documents. So on a WhatsApp group of entrepreneurs, someone was messaging that they're quickly transferring their documents out of CamScanner before it stops functioning. So some of these apps are very important utilities for people. And most people didn't even know that they were Chinese, by the way.
Yeah, that's also part of it. My dad said this is a highly calibrated move. And Ellen says they banned a virus cleaner and a battery saver. And,
yes.
Mark says, "How are you doing? Did the recent suicide have any tie to them closing down TikTok?" There was some things that have been happening on TikTok, but on a giant platform like that, those things happen. But this is clearly not about any particular user's usage of TikTok in the way it is. Mark is watching from.
There is one interesting thing that happened last year in India. the Madras High Court banned TikTok for a brief period of time because there was a complaint that was filed in the High Court regarding children using TikTok. And I think children and the internet and their users, their access to services is fast becoming a really hot topic in India. But what happened post that ban, it was revoked eventually. What happened post that ban was that TikTok blew up like crazy. More and more people became aware of it. The Streisand effect effectively happened, and TikTok grew. So there have been concerns about TikTok. Even in July last year, several members of parliament raised the issue about TikTok on the floor of the House. And so these concerns related to TikTok have been going around for over a year. Why it's happened now, there's enough justification available given all that's happened over the last year. But this is a purely political move. This is a move to try and send a message. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't normally see Section 69 notices being made public. This is the first time I've seen it. And so India just wanted to send a message out.
I hear you. Aman says, what will this ban do to ByteDance valuation? ByteDance is the parent company of TikTok.
Well, imagine if the most popular app found that 30% of the users were no longer on the platform. I don't think ByteDance is going for an IPO just yet. I think they're planning to go for an IPO, but they will probably delay it until after the pandemic. This is probably not a good time to list. But it will impact their valuations going forward if they don't have the Indian users on board.
Arun says, we're very useful conversation. Recently, I learned how Sri Lankans use TikTok for the election campaign. Now this is good to learn more about TikTok. And he's coming to us from Colombo, and he was a guest on our show very early about life under COVID in Sri Lanka. And one of the guests was a priest who was celebrating Mass that day in church. If you remember last year when there was a bombing that happened of a church on Easter Sunday, and he was that priest was with us. And again, you can find that in our archives if you take a look. And Ellen's watching from New York City. Sorry, go ahead.
See, a fun fact: a TikTok star from Haryana in India actually stood for elections in the last elections in India in 2019. She lost, but she did stand for elections.
Very interesting. Ellen says hello from New York City, and Siladitya is watching from Harlem and says hi to Nikhil. Look at Arun's just tagging so many people. Everybody do this. Tag your friends so that they can all watch the show later. Shiva says, great overview of what's happening in India in the cyber digital front, especially in the context of China's aggressive territorial posture. Watching from Cupertino in California. Of course, Cupertino is home of Apple and a legendary home of Apple there. And Daryl's tagging a lot of people. Makrand is watching and says, wow, Nikhil Pahwa, thanks. Mark is watching from Curry Hill, New York, often in India, USA, also China. I'd say annoyingly invasive QQs, even when you're web savvy, privacy settings drive you nuts. The QQ is also a big brand in China and Asia, but not very well known here. Aman says, let's see, what is, so many more comments coming here. Aman says, why is Nikhil not debating in the Indian news media instead of, I guess, why are you here?
I am actually. I've barely slept the last couple of days.
So we're glad to have you, but I think the implication was, why are you doing this? This is a global show. You should be in India, but you're also in India right now. And everyone, share this, retweet it. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn Live right now. And it'll all be playing right after the show finishes. Upali is watching and saying my distinguished career diplomat's take will obviously be a considered one. Rose is watching, our producer. Many thanks to Rose for 111 days working on the show, no breaks, as you can imagine how tough that is. Lori White is watching and says hello, joining from Rhode Island, learning from you both about these geopolitical actions and reactions. And Lori was my guest as we, both of us interviewed Nick Kristof and Cheryl Wu Dunn a couple of weeks ago. And it seems like a lifetime ago with all these, do you have the same sense, Nikhil, that time has changed? Everything is kind of smushed together and moving so quickly and so slow at the same time?
I don't know about slow speed, but things are moving really rapidly for me. It's like one tech policy thing happening after the other, which is scrambling to stay up to date with all that's going on globally. And as more and more people start working from home, we're all working from home here at MediaNama. So things become a lot trickier. By the way, your dad just said that this is about cyber sovereignty. That's a really important take. In fact, like I mentioned, at the UN, India said that they claim sovereignty over data. And at the core of this debate is this idea about what kind of an internet do we want? Like the internet that we've grown up with, which is brought the world together, that allows me and you to communicate across, the world. What do we want in terms of privacy, in terms of free speech, in terms of different countries having different jurisdictions that enable and disable different parts of the internet? Will we have the same internet now that, in 10 years from now that we have today? What role does India play in this? What role does the US play in this? What role does China play in this? What's the model of the internet of the future? Is something that I'm really interested in exploring, and I'm looking at. Sorry, the machinations in India are fascinating because we're right at the cutting edge of policy change, and it's a government that's trying to control a platform that it's been unable to do so far. So there are lots of changes in laws taking place, and what you might find is that what happens in India begins shaping most of the emerging markets going forward. They might take their cue from India because it has such a large population online. So fascinating time to be in the space, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine. How does MediaNama make its money? Do you have advertisers, sponsors, subscriptions, all of the above?
So we have advertisers, we have sponsors. We used to do offline discussions, kind of like brain spars with tech policy folks trying to unpack a particular issue and learn new things from each other. We've now shifted to the online model, like you are doing, and we are also in the process of rolling out subscriptions.
Okay, well, we wish you the very best with that. My dad has a question. Nikhil, do you think this is the beginning of a trade war that will not help either side?
I do. I think this is the trade war's probably already begun with this. You are going to see escalation from both sides going forward. I think India's probably going to look at a longer term plan for reducing its dependence on China, given that most of our tech infrastructure, especially handsets, are coming in from China. India's also missed an opportunity from what I remember when the US Huawei battle began, when Android initially had blocked access to APIs to Huawei devices, if you remember. Many global companies started looking for the alternatives for setting up infrastructure. India was one of the countries in contention, but our labor laws, the cost of power, the cost of running a business, the complexity in India is just so massive that I think most of the manufacturing went to Indonesia or somewhere else in Southeast Asia. So India's missed the bus on that one. But I think India can offer, if we ease businesses the ability to set up factories and infrastructure here, we have the opportunity of providing jobs and growing and providing the world an alternative in terms of a democracy which is more open, more transparent to what China has to offer. So I think there is an opportunity that we seem to be missing right now. In terms of a trade war, I think our dependence on China is much greater than their dependence on us. We are net importers from China. So that's going to be tricky as both sides escalate the situation.
Thank you. And we're already 50 minutes into our talk. We only have a few minutes left with Nikhil. So many questions, so many comments coming in. I'm apologizing in advance to everybody that we won't be able to cover everything. Siladitya says, does China have a genuine grievance here? they're talking about a violation of trade laws. But how does that argument hold water when their entire ecosystem is firewalled to prevent foreign apps? So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, from a sovereignty and a security perspective, I don't think trade laws can necessarily address that. And India has invoked Section 69 that looks at, that's looking to preserve the integrity and sovereignty of the country. So I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand the WTO processes or the complaints. But Siddhartha makes a good point about the fact that China itself has firewalled various apps. So we're going to. I don't think they really have a leg to stand on over here.
One thing that I will say, my good friend Andrew Lee, LIH on Twitter, he's Fuzzheado, Fuzheado. He taught me very early that while we in America and other places were complaining about the Great Firewall of China, as it's called, that banned a lot of apps from coming in, all of that, we looked at it only from a pure democracy point of view, human rights point of view. But what that allowed was homemade apps in China to become so popular, powerful, and so many companies became billion-dollar valuations because of that, because they had their own kind of island in the digital world. India, of course, did not do that. America, of course, did not do that. And you're seeing that there are, in fact, very few Indian brands in digital that are known globally. There are services companies, of course. But if you can just talk about a couple of apps that are Indian, homegrown Indian apps that people may learn about in the years ahead.
So, see, just to add to what you said earlier, India has been eyeing the China model fairly closely for a while. They like the fact that China's got the Great Firewall, that they have greater control, but they don't want to go that far. So, Indian policymakers have been on record to say that, we're going to have our own model of the internet, our own approach to the internet. We're not necessarily going to go with the Western model, but we're also not going to go with the China model. So they're trying to find a middle somewhere which is more regressive than the freedoms that we have today on the internet. Not something we're happy about. Some great Indian apps, Paytm, which is the largest payments app in India, PhonePe, which is owned partly by Walmart. Both of these are payments apps, and they're hugely popular in India. Zomato is a global food delivery, restaurant review platform that competes with Yelp. It's probably bigger than Yelp, to be honest. Wow. You've got a couple of software as a services companies also in Freshdesk and also Wingify. Ola is India's competitor to Uber, and Ola has done better than Uber in India. ShareChat is a platform that's competing with TikTok, which is popular amongst the vernacular language users in India. So we've seen a whole bunch of unicorns. There's Big Basket for deliveries. Flipkart, which is now owned by Walmart, famously, Walmart bought it for $19 billion to enter India, was and has given Amazon a run for its money in the market. It's now owned by Walmart, but it's still a homegrown brand.
Got it. Let's see here. Kabir says 30% of its users remain on TikTok. Only new users can't download it. Let's get that straight. Is that correct?
No, that's not. So if you reboot your phone, that's what you'll see. So this is the screenshot in the middle is from me. I couldn't use TikTok, so TikTok has pulled itself off.
So if you don't reboot, you can use it for a while, and then eventually you'll see that. So thank you for clarifying that. Sneha is tagging a friend Tanvir and saying follow Sree, you like his feed. Well, thank you so much. That's very kind. I'm at Sree on Twitter, and SreeNet is our archive of all our shows, more than 100 shows that we have done. Let's see, lots of folks coming in here, and Kabir says TikTok hasn't been blocked, so they'll continue to generate revenue from those who already. So this is not true, right? This is all not true. Misunderstanding.
This is not true. So let me explain this. Right? It takes time for these bans to actually come into effect. ISPs will block it. If you go onto the Google Play Store or you go onto the Apple App Store, you'll find that TikTok is no longer available for download in India. Those screenshots that I put up are actually, I've taken that screenshot. You'll find that over a couple of days, people will not be able to use TikTok in India. TikTok's actually sent out this user notice that you see on your screen as well, informing users that they're in the process of complying. So look, it's not, even if it's working right now, it's not going to work in a couple of days. These things take time to proliferate.
Yeah, thank you. And Ellen is tagging her friends, and all of this is happening here in real time. It is great to, Aman says, trying to imagine Arnab Goswami hosting this. So for those of you
Oh man. Sorry, there is a video, Sree, I'll send that to you. You should share it. There is a crazy video of Arnab actually talking about this particular ban. It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, he must have lost it. So just so you, for people who aren't familiar with Indian television, there's this guy Arnab Goswami who makes Sean Hannity look like a meek, serious, quiet, calm journalist, and makes Fox look like something very thoughtful and serious, as opposed to this kind of crazy thing that it is. And so he's saying Arnab Goswami. I was once, by the way, interviewed by Arnab, and he shouted at me for 30 minutes. I don't think I got a word in. It was a very interesting way to do an interview, just kind of scream at the other person, which was very interesting. Surya says it is okay to depend on US companies like Facebook and Google with a questionable privacy policy, or it's time to take steps on them too, like on TikTok.
Now, that's an interesting question. The problem is that India doesn't have a privacy law. So we're in the process of formulating a privacy law. It's currently with the Joint Parliamentary Committee. And, those companies will have to comply with the law. In the absence of a law, they can get away with it. India is also pushing for localization of data. So WhatsApp wasn't able to launch WhatsApp payments in India until they ensure that all the data is stored within the boundaries of India. But for me, I prefer a global internet. Data should be stored anywhere in the world, because you end up creating honeypots in your own data centers. Hackers will know what to target to steal your data. Look, this is more of a physical standoff between India and China, transitioning or adding on a cyber layer. I don't think India and the US are at war. I hope they won't be. But if that situation ever arises, you might see similar action there as well. This is not a privacy action. Let's be very clear. This is a pure political action against China.
So not a privacy, but on a political action. So that's very interesting for people to understand that. Just as we are getting ready to let you go and start your day, maybe I hope even get a nap in at some point today. What are things that people should keep in mind as they're trying to understand the story, and what are the signs they look for in developments in the days ahead?
I think we need to see what China will do next. That's a question that I've been grappling with over the past few days, saying, how is China going to react to this? Because even though it's a small impact in terms of revenue, it's a large impact in terms of users. What tools do they have to respond? And I think in all of this, we need to keep in mind that cyber warfare is here. It's here to stay. You might end up seeing more attacks on Indian websites. You might, therefore, there's this really interesting conversation that's happening at the UN right now around cyber stability and peace in the cyberspace. Microsoft's one of the companies that's working very hard on ensuring cyber peace because they have a lot of the infrastructure in Azure that gets impacted by attacks. And some of these are norms like a Geneva Convention for the internet. So also about whether, let's say, countries can allow the usage of their territory for attacks against other countries. We're going to be having a lot more of these conversations around cyber attacks and cyber warfare and countries deploying cyber weapons against companies like, let's say, WhatsApp in case of the NSO hack that was reported last year, but also against various countries on power plants, etc. Right? So this is going to escalate over the next few years. The China situation is just one step in that direction of a face-off between two countries. So watch for signals on cyber warfare over the next few years. I think that should be a really interesting space to track.
And tell us about, we're looking at your Twitter feed right now. Tell us a little bit about what you tweet about and what we can find if we follow you.
So I mostly tweet about tech policy stuff. I have very little time to tweet about anything else. Most of my work is in trying to unpack what's happening in tech policy, specifically in India, but also global development. I sometimes tweet about music that I'm listening to. I don't do enough of that now, to be honest. But geopolitics is of a great deal of interest for me. I'm trying to learn more and more of that stuff as it happens. Just been doing a lot of TV shows of it, so you'll find that on my timeline. But I've also been doing threads when things happen in order to just explain the background, because I've been covering this space for 12 years, Sree. I feel really old, and we first met when I was very young in this space. It's like a lot of the current generation of people who are reporting on this space don't have that history. And so sometimes one has to remind them saying, hey, in 2011, this has happened. And that's why we need to look at the current situations in that context. So a large part of my job is trying to make sense of what's happening, keeping history in mind.
I hear you. Explain your Twitter handle, NIXXIN.
Yeah, so most forums back in the day when we used to go on forums did not allow 3-character names. So my nickname in most places was Nixon. Nix is my nickname at home. And so I just converted it into a palindrome.
Right.
And now I try and grab this particular handle wherever I go.
Very nice. And again on your Twitter feed, you can see it says at MediaNama, at TED Fellow, at Asia 21 Leaders, co-founder of SaveTheInternet.in, X at Internet Freedom, and then you have a Hindi. I guess it's a line from a song. Tell us about it.
No, so I was searching for my great grandfather, who was one of the first awardees of the Padma Shri. And I found this article by a famous Indian author called Khushwant Singh. That line says, "Mere yaar patang udaya kar, kat jaye to gum na khaya kar." So essentially, what it means is that, my friend, fly the kite. Don't feel sad if it gets cut. So it's more about being in the moment, doing what you want to do, doing what you need to do, and not getting worried or upset if things don't go your way. And I've never met my great grandfather, but I found that quote to be really, really inspirational. And it's about being an entrepreneur, being an opportunist, whatever you take out of it. Enjoy what you do is what he's been quoted as saying by Khushwant Singh, no less.
And Khushwant Singh, a very famous and distinguished journalist. And just one way to tell how important Nikhil is in the Indian media scene, you can see that 350 people that I follow him. That means that he's really the kind of person who you want to know if you're covering India or you have anything to do with India. Lots more comments coming in. Mark is asking, what was that Yelp competitor? Zomato, right? With a Z.
Zomato.
Zomato. Indian finance company you mentioned?
That's Paytm, which is, by the way, Alibaba is a major investor in.
Okay. And what about those using VPNs? Can they avoid all this or no?
So in India, there's an attack going on encryption right now, where they're trying to undo end-to-end encryption. The government's pushing for it. My sense is the next attack is going to be on VPNs, if once this gets resolved. Yes, you can use VPNs, and thankfully you can still use VPNs. We just hope that we'll be able to continue using VPNs 5 years from now.
Wow, that's a very scary thought. Alex says, very interesting information. He's watching from Trivandrum, where my mom is also watching from. So hi, Amang, great to have you here, and hi to my parents. You've been to Kerala, of course, I'm sure.
I absolutely love Kerala. We were there in December last year. We went to Alapi, went on some houseboats. So it was gorgeous. And yes, I have been to China. I've been to Beijing. I've been to Shanghai. I found 3 hours of peace in Shanghai at the Yuyuan Garden. It was very interesting.
And he's making a pun out of President Nixon, who went to China and
Yes,
opened
of course.
the Chinese relations, and now you are Nixon, and that now I know the backstory. So that's great. We really must let you go. Any final thoughts before we send you on your way?
Yeah, see, just as final thoughts, I think something I said earlier as well, right? We've all grown with an open, fair, free, global internet. And I think we need to spend some time thinking about what kind of internet we'd like and what can we do to retain the internet that we have. That's my drive, that's my mission, in the sense, trying to unpack what's going on in order to make, in order to ensure that we can keep the internet open, fair, free, and competitive. And I think it will take all of us to make sure that happens. And we should do what we can to preserve what we have right now. Thanks.
That's very, very important. Thank you so much. Very grateful to you, Nikhil. Good luck with everything. And we'll try not to trouble you for a little while. I know everybody's going to be reaching out. Good luck with everything, and keep us posted. By the way, I didn't mention to you, you were the very first tweet that I went to find. As soon as I heard about
thank you.
I knew that I had to go and find you and see what you had to say, and immediately you had started that thread. That was very important. I'll just tell you one other quick thing. This is my TikTok account. As you can see, I'm just playing around with it. My children were very upset when I said I was joining TikTok. They said, I don't want you to be another dad on TikTok. And I said, Will Smith is a dad and he's on TikTok. And they said, you're no Will Smith. Is what my 17-year-old twins said to me. But I'm Sree.net. Are you? Well, we don't know if you're on TikTok anymore, but you're Nixon on TikTok if we can find you there, right? Maybe we can see you. Can we do that?
I haven't registered a personal TikTok account, but at MediaNama was there. There's one video.
Let's take a look. 1 second. Let's see if it's there. There you go.
There's just one video there.
Yeah, but that means so the accounts are still there overseas. It's India's access to them that has been stopped. So that's very interesting too.
That's a really old video, Sree. I haven't done enough on TikTok, to be honest.
But that's great too.
I gotta take some tips from you.
No, not from me. You have to take them from a 15-year-old or a 21-year-old somewhere who knows what they're doing. And with that, we'll let you go. Our guest, thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Folks, our guest has been Nikhil Pahwa, who is an expert on all things digital in India. Please follow him at NIXXIN and follow at MediaNama. India now becoming the social media capital of the world, and how all of this unfolds is going to be fascinating to watch, and implications for hundreds of millions of people, not just in India, but worldwide. Thank you for joining us. We have another series of great shows coming up, including on Thursday at noon Eastern. We again are being joined by very senior doctors from the WHO, World Health Organization. We already had the chief scientist of WHO. That was episode number 99 of this series. Please go back. This is 111. You just go to YouTube and you can find them all there. We're very grateful to all of you who watched. Please tag us. Please tell us if you have any questions or comments, any feedback. Sree@Sree.net is my email. My YouTube is SreeNet. We'd love to hear from you. Radhyan says, thank you so much, Nikhil. And as always, thank you. Surya is asking a question about Jairaj and Phoenix. I'm not sure what that is. And Vishal says, very soon the audit trails by the enforcement agencies would expose such paid media. I guess he's saying this is paid media in some way. A lot of people have very strong feelings in India. Also, lots of trolls in Indian media. And Jonathan says interesting points about the escalation. Hope it doesn't go further. Thank you. And Jonathan has watched 111 straight episodes, and he was a guest on our 100th episode of this series. We're very grateful to all of you. One of the things that we do on the show at the end of every show, as a result of our interviewing Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor at Columbia Law School who coined the term intersectionality, I asked her, what should we be doing? And she said, say their names, the names of those killed in police violence. And so I've been doing that every single day, and I will do that here again tonight. And I appreciate everyone who has watched and stayed. and understands why we do this and why it's important that we do this. And we use this this cover from Time magazine, a very poignant cover by Titus Kaffer, the artist, of a mother with her child taken away. And we've juxtaposed this here with this photograph of a young George Floyd with his mother, Larcinia, who would die 2 years before her son would be killed, almost to the day. And then they're buried next to each other in Houston. He was, of course, killed in Minneapolis. And so now we will read the names. The names are Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Jerame Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, William Chapman, Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, Samuel Dubose, Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Joseph Mann, Terrence Crutcher, Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson, Michael Dean, Ahmad Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. To that list, we also add Richard Brooks, who was shot and killed on camera 2 weeks ago in Atlanta. And we'll also add to that list the story of a young man who joined us to tell us about his brother. Ryan Boodoo joined us to tell us about his brother, who at the age of 32 was killed in what he believes was police violence in custody. He wrote an article in USA Today, and you can find that at bit.ly/Ryan Op-Ed. Please check that out. And this was episode 103 of Ravi Boodoo, who was killed in police custody. You can go back and watch that a week ago on all my channels here. With that, we thank you very much for your time, your interest, your support of this show. We want to thank our sponsors for supporting us in everything we do on this topics of pandemic and various things that are happening. And you're seeing how America is now, multiple states are at all-time highs, and we are seeing that Dr. Fauci has told us that we're running out of time where this can be turned around. And it's almost like the 100 days of sacrifice that was made in the Northeast of the United States completely wasted, as this president and governors, one after the other, who did not believe in science, did not believe in what is happening on the ground, forced the reopening. Dr. Fauci said that in the American system, they had said that there were guidelines for reopening, and they were called gating guidelines. And with each, when a state would reach a milestone, it could go to the next phase, next phase, next phase. Not a single state met a single one of those guidelines before they opened. And that tells you why we're in this tragic situation. And now we're begging people to wear masks, but the president himself will not go on camera wearing a mask. His vanity is keeping him from doing it. Totally unacceptable. And we are going to all pay a price. It's now 125,000 Americans killed in this pandemic. And of course, deaths all over the world, and very, very tragic. And we're going to continue to address these issues every single day, as long as we can, as long as we need to. And we are very grateful to all of you for helping us do just that. We want to thank Rutgers for the Global Entrepreneurship Experience. It's a virtual teen camp, globalentrepreneurshipexperience.org, 20% off with the code SREE. There are 2 separate weeks starting July 13th and July 20th, and your kids can learn from experts at Google, at Facebook, and elsewhere. So tell them to sign up, please, and use the code 20% off with SREE. We also want to thank our friends at Muckrack for Fundamentals of Social Media. They gave us the resources to give you a free certification course that anyone in the world can sign up to. mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. I want to see if I can find here a very nice note from Arun Arokyanathan, who said, very satisfied to complete The Fundamentals of Social Media from Muckrack Academy. I'm so proud of the certificate. More than 200 people on Facebook, most of them journalists, congratulated me. I hope at least I can inspire 10 people to follow the course. Yes, I'm so glad to hear it. Share your certificate online and mrac.co/social. Free course available right now. It's about 2 hours of work. It's kind of Netflix style, if you can imagine how that's put together, meaning it's all on demand. You can do it in 2 hours or you can do it in 20 days. It doesn't matter. And we're going to have a fun live open office hours session next week. So those of you who finish taking the course can join us for that. So definitely watch your email if you sign up at mrac.co/social. If you couldn't keep up with any of the things we talked about, just email me, Sree@sree.net, SREE@sree.net. And with that, reminder of this episode, India tackles TikTok. Nikhil Pahwa at NIXXIN of at MediaNama was our guest. And do check out the archives of our shows. All of them are live and available at youtube.com/Sreenet. youtube.com/Sreenet. With that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you very much, everybody. And please send us your ideas for speakers, topics, guests, and sponsors. Thanks, everybody. Bye.